I want to bring in our Chief Global Affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz. Martha, he talked about the heroism, the bravery of our Marines, soldiers, and sailors, but so much of that Q&A was operational in nature. We really have to take a moment, because when he said 12 U.S. service members were killed, this is a very dark day for this country.
It is indeed, and I have been to many Pentagon briefings, and I have to say this seemed particularly tone-deaf. General McKenzie made that horrid announcement, 12 service members dead, 15 wounded. He made the announcement and moved on to what he considered good news, how many they've evacuated, and those numbers are great, but it's as if nothing catastrophic had happened just hours before. And you've got to know, you certainly know this, David, that the focus is going to be on President Biden, who said he wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan to protect our troops, and now we have had this mass casualty event. I think it's the worst mass casualty event in Afghanistan involving our service members in about a decade. The last time there was any combat death was a year and a half ago in Afghanistan, and nothing since until today. He talked about those Marines, he said, or the service members being so close to the bomber. I was thinking of the video that our Ian Pannell has shot just yesterday, and seeing those service members up on a berm just outside the airport there, and there were many of them together. Can't imagine that there were 12 or 27 right down there with people checking IDs, but you can see numbers of troops, and they are very close to the people who are desperate to get in, showing documents. Our service members have shown such humanity throughout this mission. We have about 6,000 service members there protecting the airport, but there are clearly major flaws. They had been watching this for more than a week. This threat was evident for more than a week. General McKenzie there at the end talked about all the equipment we have there and surveillance and drones and everything else, but they were unable to stop this. It's extremely difficult to stop a suicide bombing, extremely difficult. That's why that alert went out last night for Americans to stay away, leave the area immediately, but people were still crammed by that gate, and clearly there were a lot of U.S. service members by that gate together as well, David.
And he talked about the nature of this mission, Martha, talking about our U.S. forces, our servicemen and women on the ground coming face to face with each individual before they can actually enter the airport. I think that was a stark illustration of the danger that our soldiers are going through, our troops are going through there on the ground. He was pressed, and he did say he had a heavy heart. He was pressed on whether or not the families were being notified. He believes that process is underway, though he said that's not part of what his duties are at this point. He appeared simply resolute that this operation continues, Martha, but he said this ISIS threat going forward, it does continue. There are imminent threats of anything from a rocket attack to another vest-wearing attacker. You've got to assume that there was some communication between the Pentagon and the White House before this briefing, but it would seem from General McKenzie that this operation moves forward amid so many questions about the safety of our troops right now.
He made clear that this operation is going forward. He didn't say exactly. I think he did say a convoy or a busload of people got onto the airport grounds. My guess is that they're rallying them at some other point and then bringing them through the airport so they do not have this kind of thing happen again. I can imagine that Afghans are probably going to stay away from those gates now, and yet you have this confluence of events, David. You have people desperate to get out of Afghanistan for the very reason we saw today, the danger, and add on that, the Taliban are now in charge. So you have people desperate to leave, and yet you have ISIS circling the place trying to attack.
And Martha, you and I know President Biden is not the first president to want to get out of Afghanistan, but there will be questions immediate, particularly given the horrific toll on our U.S. troops and forces today. 12 U.S. service members were killed. Immediate questions about the planning that went into this particular drawdown date, this particular withdrawal. Were they prepared for the potential dangers? Questions that they've been asking all along. The president has talked about this being a dangerous mission, has talked about the threat of terror, but now the American people have watched it unfold, and there will be difficult questions ahead. I want to bring in Ian Pannell, who is in Qatar at this hour. He's been on the ground in Kabul for many days with us every evening on World News Tonight. And Ian, I know that you were standing in that very vicinity of where these attacks took place. You know how close those two attacks were. And you also know what General McKenzie just described there, the incredible danger faced by U.S. troops in coming face to face with every individual that enters that airport.
Yes, I mean, I can't echo General McKenzie's words enough. There is no easy way to do it. At some point, as he said, you've got to feel the breath of the person on your cheek and you've got to touch their clothes. It is very confused. It's very chaotic down there. There will be questions about the timeline and whether that has created some of the angst, some of the crush down there. There have to be questions about the Taliban checkpoints. I heard someone raise that question in the Pentagon briefing there. I mean, they're not real checkpoints in the sense that people are patted down like we've all seen in Iraq, for example, or down in the missions further south in Afghanistan when the US presence there was at its peak. So it's shambolic, it's chaotic down there, it's confusing. There are thousands of people. Every single person is shouting out, waving papers, waving passports, crying out for attention. And you've got people frantically, because they're aware of the constraints of the time, military, US Marines, US soldiers going out essentially in front of the wire to go and get people and rescue them. We saw British soldiers, Marines stood on the berm, stood on the wall there, right over that canal. There's no other way to do it. Yes, you have a big solid metal gate, which is technically the Abbey Gate, but at some point you've got to go out, touch them and bring them in.
Ian, General McKenzie, in fact, acknowledged that right at the end of that questioning there. He said there was a failure somewhere, that this suicide bomber was able to get that close to our Marines.
Yes, I mean, having seen the situation there, I can see how it would happen. There didn't seem to appear to be a very clear system. You know, I've done a lot of embeds, seen the military in Iraq, in Afghanistan and elsewhere, and often there are very clear-cut systems. People can't approach until they perhaps raise their shirt and show that they're not carrying a weapon, and you can have a standoff. But there is no standoff. You are cheek by jowl, that narrow pathway that leads next to the canal, once people have made it through that sewage water, it's only sort of 3 or 4 feet wide, and people are cheek by jowl, and that creates risk and danger.
So many families here at home now bracing for a potential phone call. Ian, Pannell in Qatar for us. There is a breaking headline coming in while we're on the air right now, and I want to get back to Martha Raddatz, because Martha, you and I were on the air here last night, and right afterward, that warning from the U.S. State Department to get away from the airport, that warning went out to Americans in Kabul because of the terror threat, and now we're learning that ISIS-K, sworn enemy not only of the U.S. but of the Taliban there in Afghanistan. ISIS-K now claiming responsibility for the attack near the airport. Martha, you and I know we have to take these claims of responsibility very carefully. We've seen groups step in to claim responsibility before, but you and I both know that authorities in the U.S. government, the federal government, were fearing that ISIS-K could be responsible and that this threat was increasing by the day from them.
Exactly, and ISIS-K has launched dozens and dozens of attacks in Afghanistan over the past few months. They say in this statement they provide a photo of the bomber. They name him and say, according to this message, the fighter was able to overcome all the security fortifications, reaching a distance of no more than 5 meters from the American forces, and detonated his explosive belt. This says killing 60 and wounding over 100 others. We don't have those numbers ourselves. But David, I feel like we're going back 10 years here, photos of suicide bombers in Afghanistan. But ISIS-K is a terrible, terrible threat in Afghanistan. When I was there in June, I visited a girls' school where ISIS-K had blown up several suicide belts at this school, killing more than 80 kids, mostly young girls. I talked to one of those young girls, and she was determined to go back to school, but now she lives in a country where the Taliban control it all.
Martha Raddatz with us. And again, ISIS-K now claiming responsibility for this very deadly attack at the Kabul airport in the last 24 hours. We now know that 12 U.S. service members were killed, 15 more injured. General McKenzie said he believes the process has begun, the notification process for families back here in the U.S. And as Martha just pointed out, not only are they claiming responsibility, they're offering a description and detail of their suicide bomber being able to, as Martha just said, overcome all the security fortifications, reaching a distance of no more than 5 meters from the American forces. There will be many questions coming, and of course we await word from the White House and certainly from President Biden. If and when he speaks to the nation, we will come right back on the air.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.